Good evening. Oh, look. Oh, good evening and welcome, members of Professional CAD, the autobiography. Yeah, nice. George Sanders, nice.
Doing some last minute research for tonight.
Welcome to Loud and Nerdy. Welcome to Generation Movie. Jesus. Every once in a while I lose it. Welcome to Generation Movie on a Monday night, our new night. Please welcome Rich Drees, my co-host, FILMBUFF Online's Rich Drees. We're both clearly with the things on tonight. We're clearly in full spectacle, ready for tonight's movie, which is of course the impeccable All About Eve. We're going to be talking about that tonight. Very excited. It's a great movie. It's about Hollywood. It's about Broadway. It may be the precursor of every thriller you've seen in the last 20 years. Little things.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, part of our Oscar Decade Cavalcade. First off, we want to thank everybody on the Loud and Nerdy Network, which we're the Indie Escape Network. What the fuck is wrong with me tonight?
Dude.
I'm sorry. I'm Oscared out. Is what I was up all night watching stuff. Yeah, Indie Escape
Take 10
Network.
more minutes to talk Oscars with me, and then you can forget about them for another 6 months.
Until we get going. But I want to welcome everybody to our show tonight. We're so happy to be on the Indie Escape Network. Of course, the Indie Escape Network has a YouTube channel. By all means, follow it and watch it. You can see all of our shows archived and everything on there. So we're well over 35 shows. We're almost like 40 shows. So by all means, join us. And then they also have a great Facebook channel where you can get all the Facebook information. Also, get links to all the different shows, what guests are coming up on whatever shows. And sometimes the guests are really great. The Sticky Microphone last week had Billy West. It was fantastic. So we're super excited to be on the network. A lot of good shows, a lot of good people. Joe Ridgely at the end of the night with David Madison, Sticky Microphone with Wendy Zire. So many people joining the network and getting in. And of course it has us as well, which I'm partial. I'm partial to us. Although I can't get my shit right tonight. I think it's part and parcel. How are you doing? I know you're recovering as well. I know you've been busy and doing all kinds of updates and podcasts and just show reviews. And how are you doing? I'm sorry I was a little tired, and I'm sorry I was speaking out of the side of my mouth.
I actually took most of the afternoon away from writing, away from editing our the other podcast that I do, the Big Picture podcast with my co-host Natasha Bogutsky, because we record almost immediately after the Oscars every year. We record our first out of the box reactions, and then she goes home, and I still stay up for. I try to stay up for another hour or so to do all the editing to get it ready to go first thing in the morning. Last night though, I was kind of wiped out, so I finished it up in the morning and posted it. Our normal shows are about an hour and 10 minutes. This one runs, I think, 40 minutes, but that's usual for just after Oscars because it's a lot of gut reactions to things.
But you're gonna have a day off though because you have snow coming, right? Theoretically,
stupid day job. I can work from home, and I do have my stupid day job laptop over on the other side of the room here. So,
but you're doing well.
I could work from home, and maybe in the background, my TV's on, and I'm watching something on Turner Classics. Maybe.
So we got some comments already because I fucked up early. Good evening, gentlemen. How about that, Brendan Fraser? Yeah.
Oh my god.
I'm happy for him. I'm not in love with the movie as I am with Brendan Fraser's comeback. I do want a Brendan Fraser comeback. As a big guy, The Whale is kind of it's an incredible movie. It is amazingly well done. I don't necessarily agree with it about how big people live. So just a personal thing. But we'll talk about it. Let's see. Just means a Loud and Nerdy to be on the Indie Escape Network. Okay, Joe, I see where you're at. I see what you're doing. Good evening, friends. Ken McKernan, good evening to you too. We are going to start tonight with stuff that's important to like 5 people in the world, including me and Rich. We're gonna.
I would say far more than just 5
There was
people.
There was 2 million watchers last night.
2 million more than last year.
More than last year. Oscars.
Yeah.
So, what is one takeaway? I don't necessarily mean awards, but takeaway from the show itself. Let's start there because that'll give us a good 5 minutes. We were talking about it before we get on. I think the show needs a host, Rich. I think it needs a big personality that can corral all the other big personalities and move the show along at a genetically good pace.
It's like I said the last 2 years when they went hostless. You need somebody to kind of, be the physical embodiment of steering this massive ship along, and
avoid icebergs.
Yes.
Well, and that's part of the thing that happened. Like, I don't want to talk about the slap anymore. I'm done talking about it. But I will say, one of the things that happened last year was there was nobody to chill the room out, right? There was nobody to go, hey, self-important Hollywood folks, relax for 2 minutes. Also, I don't know if you should still be in the theater anymore. Like, there was nobody to do that. I think aside from a few bits that the audience bit didn't work. Aside from a few bits, most of the stuff, most of the jokes hit pretty hard. They're pretty. I mean, the Babylon joke was funny, but mean. I got to tell you, Cocaine Bear was a hit, man. I was laughing my ass off because the bear was hilarious. Like Elizabeth Banks going, "What are you trying to do? Score some blow for later? Stop that." The bear made me laugh in ways that I haven't laughed in a while at the Oscars.
The joke about Robert Blake, though. I mean, I love dark comedy, as you know. I have a really twisted, fucked up sense of humor most days.
So do I.
And even I was like, yeah, maybe not that one.
Well, the Robert Blake joke, is especially hard because you don't have him in the in memoriam segment. So if you're gonna take a joke at his expense, you have to take a joke at the fact that he was in one of the greatest American movies ever made, In Cold Blood. So I think that's another thing that we have to talk about.
And also the in memoriam. Well, first of all, also Robert Blake. A bunch of other things very noteworthy across his career before he fucked himself up, including he was the second to the last of Little Rascal to live. There's like one other guy. Not one of the better known ones, obviously, who's like 101 right now. And I cannot remember his name, just saved my life. And I apologize to him. But the fact that they screwed up the in memoriam anyways, which is almost a given every year, unfortunately.
Well, I want to propose something on this show for the Oscars. Okay. What I would like you to do is hire somebody that sits down with a calendar. And what we should do with the in memoriam, it should just be the calendar year going by with everybody that passed on whatever day, and go and find a song that's long enough to cover the entire goddamn year and have a picture go over it and make sure how do you miss Anne Heche? How do you miss Paul Sorvino?
Paul Sorvino, yes.
How do you miss
Cindy
How
Williams.
do you miss Tom Sizemore, for fuck's sake?
Sizemore was, I don't want to say the phrase last minute, but he was really close to the actual thing. And I know in years past they had a date, you had to pass
a cutoff date, right?
Yeah, cutoff date, and
because it goes year to year.
And that might have been just a production.
I have no problem
because of they were using film at the time or something. But I mean, we're digital now. We can pretty much slide somebody in at the last possible second. I
feel we need somebody in charge of it. I feel there needs to be somebody who actually just sits and looks day to day. And I don't mind some people are saying, I don't know who any of these people are, right? I don't care about that because these are people that are important just because we don't see them.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate some of these, people who are lesser known to the general public being recognized. Since I was in high school, I've always been a fan of, special effects, practical, physical special effects. And the fact that they mentioned Greg Ginn, who was a model maker and a designer of visual effects. He was like, I think he was the lead model maker on like the V original miniseries. He worked on Star Trek. He worked on a number of things.
It's
and,
not.
And I was just like, oh, and the picture they showed of him, he was working on one of the little robots from Batteries Not Included. So it was like, okay, that guy did a lot of great work that people probably have seen but never knew. And so I appreciated that they included people like him. But you're right, they need to get better with all the names. And it becomes
instead of becoming what it should be, which is celebrating these people that we have lost in the entertainment industry that leave gaping holes for people. It becomes the Monday morning where who got forgot. Yeah. And my answer to that is the only thing we could do is do it. Like, I was thinking about it last night, like a yearbook picture, right? Like a giant yearbook picture and all the days, and just go through the days and just cover everybody. And you know what? I mean, if you want to make like, one of the things I noticed last night that again is mainly for the audience, you know, if you want to make pictures bigger, right? If you want to make somebody bigger, great. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to expand the picture out, you expand the picture out, but we've got to fix it because it becomes.
Part of me says, you know, farm it out to the folks who do the one for TCM. Because the one on Turner Classics every year just moves me to tears. Now, I will admit, though, this year I was, you know, from John Travolta's introduction, where, you know, I think John Travolta is kind of a little bit of a nutty guy, but he has a good heart. You know, and I saw that up close when I did 2 days of work. It was soulful. But the fact that he damn near almost just lost his shit completely. Just was so moving. And of course, Olivia Newton-John is right there, you know, and when he goes, you know, all the ones that, you know, we're hopelessly devoted to you. And then she's the first one up in the thing, was like, oh man, right in the feels.
But that's another thing I had a problem with. Every year we get varying degrees of people who are doing the in memoriam songs. Mm-hmm. Some of them are very good. I remember there was one that Green Day did. Billy, what's the kid's name from Green Day? But Billy from Green Day did it. Yeah, and it was fantastic. This song seemed meh to me. But I understand. I understand we want to pick somebody that's hot, but I think it also needs to. I just think we need to fix it. I don't know how. Like, I think unless you're going to do it like in documentary style, calendar, and just go through the year and just sweep through a year of like days of people we lost and have the picture come up. And if you want to expand the picture out and show one of the roles, but we've got to come up with a better way to do it. It's becoming the Monday morning quarterback where we fuck up.
I think this almost speaks to your point. I don't even remember the song. I know what Lenny Kravitz. Okay, cool. If you asked me to hum it right now with a gun to my head, we'd be dead. We'd both be dead. I'd be dead. Yeah. But the year that Billy Joe did it from the Green Day, I remember that one. Do you know what I mean? Want that maybe we could be intrusive though.
No, that's true. But I think what if somebody commissioned a song?
Give me a mood, you know, and that's it. You know,
here's another part of my take on it, right? I want to do a calendar. I also want to pick an in memoriam song. That way you can pick an artist every year and we're going to get the same song. And maybe the artist's rendition is a little bit different, but a song that commemorates their contribution, something that somebody writes that at its set, and then an artist comes in and sings that song. We know how long the song's going to be. It needs to be 4 minutes, right? Like, I think we can fix it by just taking a little bit of control, and whoever's running it is not doing it right. Let's do some comments quick. Ken McKernan wrote, I wanted to see a short round win. Yes, it was beautiful. Short round won. And then short round had one of the greatest stage moments in the history of the Oscars. Because if you don't get all like verklempt in your soul, that Indiana Jones and Short Round met on the stage for almost 40 years later. You can kiss my ass. He was Mickey and the Little Rascals. That's exactly who he was. Ken also writes thank you, Tim. The ones we really don't know, they should have like footnotes, something that they did that we might know. Sure, that would be great, but again, somebody's got to get control of this beast. It is it is a massive beast.
I mean, they did note, like in the example I mentioned, Greg Ginn, they did, note model maker there, and you saw him at work. You saw others, like editors and stuff. That would be great if, it was like editor Star Wars.
But a lot of them seem like headshots. I also think they could get a little bit more, like with the actors, we get scenes, the directors, we get scenes, or we get headshots. Like it's weird. And like, who's more important? Like, it's like actors are more important or directors are more important. I think we need to fix it. I think they need to come up with some sort of documented rules. But that being said, Ken writes, I like the song Calling All Angels by Lenny. Lenny's singing Calling. Whatever. I just think we need to fix it. I think we need a song that can be used every year. Invite the artist in. We can have our guest artist to sing it every year. Pick somebody who's hot. Great. And who's going to give a killer rendition.
And to speak of this also, this is a discussion I was having earlier today with one of my writers on FilmBuff Online, my very good friend, Bill Gadavasquez, who's our mostly, our comic book movie editor. He does a lot of feature stuff on things like that. He wrote for us a huge, like,
he's a good friend. Bill is very knowledgeable and he's a lot of fun to talk.
And he is, I think, as we speak, writing a piece about what the Academy should do about the in memoriam sequence.
Well, that's interesting.
So if I'm gonna plug a little bit for my site, I'm gonna plug my friends who are working for me.
Well, I didn't talk to him about this. I think it's great that he's working on how to fix it. But I was thinking about it all last night because as you're starting to read through, like, no Connie Stevens, no, like just weird names that pop up where you go, how do you miss them? How do you? And it seems to happen every year. So the idea that we haven't taken it and fixed it, and the idea that that it dominates the talk the next year, who got forgotten, it's even bigger than the snubs at this point, right? It's bigger than the nomination snubs. It's bigger. It's become a weird thing. But that being said, the in memoriam thing kind of like is always something we complain about. Last night's show was pretty smooth. And as Jimmy Kimmel put up, the Oscars since last incident, the one, the show was tight. It was only about 3.5 hours long, which isn't bad for the Oscars. It was tight. It was one of the more joy.
Was it shorter than last year?
I think it was, and by about 12 or 13 minutes.
They tried to do away with like a bunch of categories too. So
yeah, it's weird. But it was also a joyous night. There were great speeches, very joyous emotion. It was like even the speeches, like even on the undercard speeches, Natu winning for best song, and then somebody doing a Carpenter's rendition is poetic genius, license, whatever. But the speeches by Ke Huy Quan and Michelle Yeoh speaking to a generation of people who have never been on that stage, getting an Oscar, representing, Asian kids around the world.
Yes,
that you can get on this stage, and also the Michelle Yeoh thing had, not only did she have a great speech and both talking to their mothers who are both 84 years old, which is weird. But also the idea that Michelle Yeoh getting up there and saying, not only am I an Asian woman who looks like other kids are going to be able to look up here and see me, but Michelle Yeoh pushing back on, you're too old for this role, or you can't get this role. Or so she's not only pushing against, the idea that we've never had Asian winners before, but she's also pushing against the backlash that you get too old in Hollywood for female roles, which is going to lead in a little bit to our discussion tonight, which is, it's an incredible jump, but we'll talk about it. Everything Everywhere All at Once winning 7 out of 11 is impressive.
It was only ever going to win 10 out of 11 at best, because it was
right because
two different actresses nominated in supporting.
Well, and that's another thing that's going to come up tonight. We have a movie that so last night we had 3 actresses nominated in the same movie. Tonight, All About Eve has 4 actresses nominated in the Best Supporting Actress, and Best Actress category. So but what a night. And aside from Jamie Lee Curtis winning, and getting a little bit of Angela Bassett shade, and but Ke Huy Quan was such a good speech. It was so good. It's good to know that the Goonies never say die, and the Goonies are always together.
That was a great thing he said in the press room. I love that.
But the idea that he got offered the role and he called his good friend and said, "Hey, can you look at this contract? Should I do it?" And Jeff Cohen, who played Chunk, is now an entertainment lawyer. God bless him, said yes. And how far, Rich, are we away from a Goonies retread or a Goonies requel, whatever the hell you want to call it? It's bound to happen now. I
think I don't know if it's a 100% lock, but I think the percentage of it happening just kind of
planets are aligning. Planets are aligning, and it's just happening the way it is. I mean, Sean Astin and Brolin, bringing them all back, they're all viable. They're all viable actors.
On the other hand, how dumb do you think David Zaslav feels right now that he doesn't have a movie that he could capitalize by advertising it as starring Academy Award winner
Brendan Fraser? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Zaslav. I don't think Zaslav cares. Zaslav getting any kind of an idea in his head aside from the 7 people that he grills on a weekly basis on how we can save money. I don't think he cares. What I will say is one of the other things about the show that was really interesting, I thought was really good. The clips after the commercial breaks, super smart, gets everybody back to their seats. Lights go down, clip happens. Really cool there. I also like the lighting on the seats. It was super cool. And I also it was really neat. And then I liked how they incorporated the song category, the song nominees. Gaga was exceptional in her non-glossed, I really love this song, and just kind of she looked like she showed up off a bender from Vegas, and she just kind of showed up, and then you realize she's filming Joker Part 2, so it's probably rough. You know what I mean? The days are probably rough, but she was fantastic. Rihanna was good. I didn't understand the set there, but I asked that question. I'm like, isn't Wakanda a tech futurist society? Why are we in a manger?
I have no idea.
I didn't understand that, but David Byrne was great. And Natsu was amazing.
Yes.
One of the idea that Bollywood could somehow, next, we had the best song win. Next is a Bollywood picture getting nominated for Best Picture, because RRR probably deserved it. I think RRR is going to be the Dark Knight, right? RRR is the Dark Knight of Bollywood, right? The idea that we're, but
the one thing I could have done without, and I think we need to go back to an old rule that they kind of got rid of. I did not need to see, as part of the Academy Awards ceremony, them pimping out the trailer for The Little Mermaid.
Nope. Didn't like it.
Didn't like it.
It was bad.
It definitely harms the impartiality of the evening. And the old rule was no commercials in the commercial breaks either for any movies either.
Well, and I thought
I think we should go back to that.
Well, and I thought midway through, I thought maybe we were going to get everyone getting it, because there was a Warner Brothers segment where Warner Brothers pimping segment was at least all about film history and about what's coming and all. And I wasn't but I was a little bit angry. I was like, I don't. First off, they trotted them out like they were presenters, so it rubbed me the wrong way.
It gives a certain imprimatur that the Academy is actually endorsing a specific movie,
right?
In this case, Little Mermaid.
When you're the other side of it is you're running a 3-minute trailer, right? The other side of it, you're running a 3-minute trailer, and then it all goes back to the goddamn in memoriam section, Rich. You're running a 3-minute trailer for The Little Mermaid, and then you're telling me to scan a QR code for other people that died this year. It's in poor taste. It doesn't look good. It also kind of like blurs the line of whether or not you're paying for the spots that, like Disney would have to pay for a spot on the Oscars in the same way that if Fox owns something and they run a spot on the Super Bowl, it should be the same thing. And I maybe go back to the rule you were saying, but I just felt it was out of place. And again, I was more rubbed by the idea of like they had QR codes popping up everywhere for all kinds of stuff. Understand the nominees better and all this other stuff. And then they got to the in memoriam section to find out who else died. And I was like, but you just had a 3-minute, like, it took away and it took me out of the element. I'm like, why the fuck are we watching a trailer for The Little Mermaid? Now, don't get me wrong. If you want to run an ad and say, hey, go to the YouTube now or go wherever you get your trailers from, The Little Mermaid trailers dropped, fine. But you cannot put it in the middle of the goddamn ceremony.
No, you're absolutely right there.
It looks bad. It's out of place.
Yeah. In the interest of speeding this along so we can actually get to All About Eve before it's time for Oscars. I just really quickly, how did you do with your Oscars?
Oh, it was terrible. It was a bloodbath. I looked down after I picked everything and I realized that I went heavy on Elvis. And going heavy on Elvis was not a good gig. I thought they might swing farther away from All Is Quiet on the Western Front, but they leaned fully into it. And then, kind of oddly enough, I had one of the best years with all the smaller categories. Like I did very well in all the shorts and all the documentary stuff. And which is usually my hang up. But this year, for whatever reason, because I was emotionally invested in Elvis and how Elvis looked and sounded, it got me. And that's fine. I'm okay with it.
I mean, I'm usually terrible at this. As I said, on the Oscar special we did Friday night.
But you did well. You had a fairly good night. I think you beat me by 3 or 4, which is fine. The funny
23, which is really good for me. Normally it's about 10 to 12.
Well, the funny thing is, all the things that won were all things that I said in the special. Right? They're all things like, hey, this could go this way. Hey, this could go this way. If this happens, this happens. Also, I was right about editing, and I was right about that if you're looking up, and editing is won by Everything Everywhere All at Once. Great. I was also super happy about Sarah Polley, who actually had the best joke of the night. The best joke of the night. She had the best joke of the night, which was, I want to thank the Academy for not getting too nervous about giving an award to a film that had women and talking very close in their title. It's one of the best jokes, and she is a gifted filmmaker that everybody should really, really keep their eye on. And also,
and if you haven't seen Women Talking, it's on Amazon Prime, I think.
It's beautiful. And there's a question for you, Rich. Talk about snubs. I know we haven't talked about snubs or anything, but the idea that none of those performances got nominated in that movie, we may be 5 or 6 years down the road go, how did we not notice Jessie Buckley or Rooney Mara?
Was it the Indie Spirit Awards where the movie they got like a specific, I can't remember what the name of the prize is, but it's, it involves, it's kind of like that picture, but it folds in the ensemble cast and everything else. It got that. And I think that's probably the best way to deal with that cast. I mean, they're all uniformly amazing.
McDormand's in it. There's so many people in it. But like I said, we're a half hour in on this, and usually we only take 10 minutes.
Yeah. Let me just, on my ballot, I think I got all four acting categories: Best Picture, Best Director, both screenplay categories, as well as Best Animated Feature and Documentary Feature. So, and then a couple of scattered ones below.
And international. I got all the ones you got right there.
Oh no, I missed international.
Because you went EO.
I went to EO. Yeah.
So we actually, in the categories you're talking about, we tied. because I missed Best Actor and you missed EO. I mean, it's not really with how they're actually weighted. It's not.
Yeah,
it's not a tie, but we got all the same ones right. It was also a push year, right? It's a year where everything going into the Academy Awards, there were no surprises. There was nothing shocking or Marissa Tomei to be seen anywhere. Right.
There wasn't a moment where somebody was already standing half up and then had to sit back down.
Yeah, and aside from Angela Bassett throwing heavy shade, although I don't know that it's shade. It's just I thought maybe this was my year, maybe and so everybody's kind of focusing on her.
She had a neutral face when maybe she could have, looked a little happy.
Yeah, she was. You know what? But the idea that one actress is not happy about another actress is a perfect kind of segue into something.
I was going to say it's not a good look for that because you want to be supportive of your peers.
Yeah, no, it isn't a good look. But if you wanted to talk about actresses not being happy with other actresses, I mean, we have a movie for you. It's all about Eve.
Yes.
And so let's start with where all of our episodes start. Let's start with production.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to move the brand thing. Give me 1 second. We'll take that down. So All About Eve is an interesting production, right? And first off, Joseph L. Mankiewicz has a lot of ties to our area. Yep. He's from Wilkes-Barre.
Well, I mean, okay. The Mankiewicz brothers, I think, even though Herman Mankiewicz, Joseph's older brother by about 11, 12 years, wasn't involved directly with this movie, he does kind of impact it a bit. Herman was born in New York. The parents moved to the Wilkes-Barre area because, first of all, Papa Mankiewicz was got a job as an editor at a German language newspaper here in the Wyoming Valley. He had that job for a year or two. Then he shifted over to teaching at a private school, the Harry Herman Academy or something like that. It's a school that no longer exists in the area. And he was teaching there.
Teaching German?
Yes. And then during that time, a couple of interesting things happened. One, of course, Joseph L. Mankiewicz was born. Another thing was family was a little tight with cash. They just didn't have a whole lot of money. But ultimately, Herman Mankiewicz was given a bicycle as a gift. He wanted it for Christmas, and family didn't get it for him for another couple of months. And one day, he rode that bike. He loved having his bike, rode it around town and stuff, rode it to the library. Went inside because he loved libraries. He was reading some books, checking stuff out. When he comes back out, his bike was stolen. Now,
son of a bitch.
Now, he didn't.
A lot of crime in Wilkes-Barre.
I know. Well,
there's a lot of crime in Wilkes-Barre.
The bicycle's name was not Rosebud, but the bicycle going missing and out of his childhood became twisted just enough into the inciting incident of Citizen Kane and Rosebud the Sled.
That is an amazing it's an amazing anecdote. It also, the interesting thing, one of the things that when you're looking up the history of this particular movie.
Oh, I'm only half done.
Finish your bike story. I'm sorry. You're all in on this because it's
family
Wilkes-Barre.
Family moves back to New York. Herman starts working as a writer, a theater critic, writing theater reviews for New York papers. Ultimately, he moves out to California, following the lure of the movies. And when he gets out there, he's like, this is insane, man. A lot of these people just aren't that great writers. There is, not a whole lot of actual real competition.
There's room. There's room for us out here.
So he wires back to his brother Joseph, and Joseph comes out too. And Joseph was always, though, looking up to his big brother, maybe a little jealous, saw that that Herman had won an Academy Award for writing Best Original Screenplay for Citizen Kane, based on something that happened when they were in Wilkes-Barre. And he said, even though Joseph L. Mankiewicz never wrote about the theater world, never set foot backstage probably, he went ahead and he looked at his brother, that world his brother inhabited, maybe took some of those stories, and then he took kind of his enviousness about his brother's Academy Award, translates the Oscar into the fictitious Sarah Siddons Award, and that becomes a basis on which he builds out the story for All About Eve.
Yeah, and he also he's not necessarily cynical as a writer, but he has, his writing doesn't have cynicism in it as much as the cynicism is picked up by the audience, right? So one of the things that comes across and in the development of this is he does read, there is a book by Mary Orr, right, that basically talks about an anecdote that Mary Orr had given about from actress Elizabeth Bernier. Bergner? Maybe, it could be Bergner, but I would say Bernier. And we're basically where she was on stage, and Mankiewicz heard the story about basically she allowed a fan to become part of her life and her household and her assistant, and she later regretted any bit of generosity. And basically, once this actress had given the events to Mary Orr, she wrote a book called The Wisdom of Eve. And Mankiewicz finds this story, but also has all of the stuff that you're talking about. So he's a little bit jealous of his brother. His writing style is totally different from his brother, right?
Oh yeah.
It's kind of like an acerbic, sharp cynicism that also is mildly hilarious. It's Citizen Kane is very statuesque. Mankiewicz's writing is just very cynical and fun and kind of catty. Like it becomes like he basically uses that Wisdom of Eve story and basically says that you can build something around the issue of theater versus Hollywood. You can also build something around the idea of a conniving girl who would do anything. But the cool thing about the script is they don't really want to let on, right? I mean, the movie keeps her secret for as long as it can. There are characters that go, hey, I don't like how she does this, or, oh, I didn't think she was, and usually the funny thing about that is Mankiewicz gives all, like, the guys are dullards, except for one, but he's catty himself. And then, but the rest of the guys are just completely oblivious to it. There's one line in the screenplay that is so brilliant where, one husband is talking to Celeste Holmes' character, and he says, I don't know where you get these ideas. And she's like, I got them the moment I noticed I wasn't a boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's this catty, cynical, but very sharp and very funny, amazing writing from Mankiewicz, right? And he finds a story, he connects it all together. They try to get as many people as they possibly can to be in this movie, because Daryl Zanuck comes up and says, "Hey, this sounds great." Zanuck was a big proponent of keeping the Hollywood versus Broadway rift alive and well, because at that time Hollywood was farming a lot of actors and actresses from the Broadway stage. Hey, it's terrible there. It's terrible in Broadway. You should come out west where everything works out. Right? So Zanuck is producing. I mean, Zanuck gets a name drop in the movie. You know what I mean? So it's like it's this like it's self-fulfilling prophecy. And then basically Mankiewicz writes the screenplay a little bit long, right? And Zanuck cuts it by about 50 pages, and basically says we're not making biblical epics, and then they come up with the title instead of The Wisdom of Eve. Basically, Addison DeWitt comment at the beginning of the movie is you learn more of Eve. Well, actually, all about Eve, in fact, and that's where they get the title.
Yeah,
which is incredible.
One of the other possible titles that Mankiewicz liked was Best Performance, which I think is a really good title for this as well.
That's perfect.
Just in terms of what the movie's about, whether it's a good marquee title as to pull the punters into part with their ticket money, I don't know. And Mankiewicz too had a habit of writing long scripts. Obviously, if you look at the full-length version of Cleopatra, for goodness sakes, that almost bankrupt 20th Century Fox. He also wrote the movie that we now know of as A Letter to Three Wives, and his original draft of that was like 160 pages or something like that, which comes out to about 2 hours and 45 minutes, which is too long a movie for the time. And so the studio was just like, well, you call this A Letter to Four Wives, just take out one of the wives. And boom, he did a nice 2-hour movie.
We lost 45 minutes on a wife. So I think when we get into these old-timey casting movies, like the cast is always very important. Who was going to play what? Where will they come? And this cast, the casting, Rich, is so important because we end up with Bette Davis, and that's terrible to say. Also, we end up with Ann Baxter, also terrible to say because they're so goddamn good in the movie, but it wasn't initially designed for them, right? In fact, one of the interesting, like Bette Davis, you know was a great actress. But Ann Baxter, she basically had spent an entire decade in supporting roles. She did win an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress in The Razor's Edge in 1946. And she basically got the role because Jean Crane got pregnant. And Jean Crane was super popular. She was, she had played all these likable heroines. And basically, Zanuck jumps in and gives Ann Baxter the shot, and not believing that Baxter could do it, in the sense that all of the characters she had played up until this point were super likable. So he didn't think that Ann Baxter was going to be able to pull it off, and Ann Baxter's so good. The other side,
but oops, I think I disappeared for a second.
Yeah, no, you didn't.
Okay. But I think that Ann Baxter's previous roles kind of really inform and work to the script's advantage once we find out how manipulative Eve really is. It allows the audience to go, okay, I was suckered too. I didn't see this coming.
This acting was phenomenal. Before we get further, hold on. Tim has a good question, and you might have the answer because you're an authority on these things. Was it the Ousterhout Library where his bicycle was stolen from?
That seems to be the local legend of this. I went through a couple of Mankiewicz biographies that I purchased in the last week that I've been meaning to. They've been on my wish list for Amazon forever. And I was just like, okay, time to pull the trigger on this. And that's one of the things I did look for. They don't say specifically it was the Ousterhout Library. I don't know if the family even knows or
what library it was
for that. Yeah. Because there may have been a couple of other public libraries in the Wilkes-Barre area at the time because we were a much bigger, more populated town.
So I'm going to go with when the history becomes a legend, print the legend, right? I mean, you got to do the Liberty Valance thing.
Yeah,
Tim, I'm going to say
that's great. I would love to, and thankfully, literally right next door to the library is the Luzerne County Historical Society. I've been meaning to find some time to get down there to research a couple of other things. I can always add that onto my list now.
Well, so we can keep that in a future show. Tim, look forward.
Thank you, Tim.
The bicycle thief of Wilkes-Barre later on in Generation Movies. cavalcade, a decade cavalcade Oscar
That's
show.
a great idea for a short documentary, actually.
The bicycle thief.
I kind of like that.
That's amazing. Well, so you talk about Ann Baxter. You also have to talk about some of the actresses. Now, we just did It Happened One Night. Claudette Colbert basically was supposed to be part of this. She got injured. Ingrid Bergman was offered the role of Margot Channing, but during her audition, Zanuck said she's too German, which, if you know Ingrid Bergman, there's really no way around that.
Yeah,
like, don't be stupid. And also Marlene Dietrich was also viewed as too German. So Susan Hayward was involved. She got too young to play the bitter Margot.
Not German enough.
But it eventually goes to Bette Davis, and Bette Davis choose scenery. They also write a role specifically.
Bette Davis almost didn't get this role either.
Yeah, no. She had so many people. It
was originally given to Claudette Colbert, and then she broke her leg.
Yeah, she had an injury.
Yeah, and then Bette Davis gets called in. So again, like so many of these great Hollywood movies, like we've said before, the casting we get, which is amazing, is an entirely accidental process.
Well, and also in this particular case,
it might not have worked.
And also in this particular case, Mankiewicz adds a bunch of characters to the story, right? Not only because the story that he is developing, he gets the story from The Wisdom of Eve, the short story about the actress's events, and he adds all of these different characters. He adds the characters of Addison DeWitt, who, again, if you have seen the movie, if you've never seen the movie or haven't seen the movie doesn't work without him. He adds Bernie Coonan, Max Fabian, and Phoebe, all added to the story and added to the script. And Thelma Ritter gets added because basically he had worked with Mankiewicz on A Letter to Three Wives. And because Thelma, like he was trusting of Thelma Ritter being able to pull off the subtlety required of somebody who's an underneath character saying, hey, maybe this character isn't all she's cracked up to be.
If you want to talk about snubs for a second, Thelma Ritter nominated 6 times for Best Supporting Actress, including her last nomination here in All About Eve. Before that, it was Mating Season, With a Song in My Heart, Pick Up on South Street, Pillow Talk, and Birdman of Alcatraz. And I mean, you've seen her in a bunch of other things, including like The Misfits, Rear Window. She's amazing. And
she's really good. She's an old-timey vaudeville actress in the movie, and she's amazing.
It bums me out that somebody of her caliber could never quite get that Oscar. That ultimate recognition.
It's the equivalent. It's the equivalent.
I perk up.
Right. Like, it's the equivalent of somebody like Frances McDormand never getting there. Right, never getting the roles that make her a bona fide dyed-in-the-wool star, like playing little, and big. Although Thelma Ritter never gets the big, right? No. Also, we need to talk about
the sassy.
The really funny characters. Like it would be. I'm trying to think of actresses that would. It's kind of like an actress today that would be. There are people that have that role that are playing these roles where if they're in it, it perks it up.
You know who she reminds me of? And just in kind of like demeanor, she reminds me of a much taller version of Rhea Perlman from Cheers.
Yes, that's perfect. That's why we're on the show together.
Maybe Rhea Perlman's on my mind because she
looks like Thelma. She looks like Thelma Ritter
last week.
Yeah,
but I was like, it just suddenly occurred to me. I was like, oh,
also
that's where it's been all my life.
Also, they make the stunning decision to cast a young ingenue by the name of Marilyn Monroe, and I totally forgotten she was in the movie, and then I as I was watching, I'm looking at her. I'm like, that's got to be her, right? I mean, my eyes fell out of my head, and I'm like, well, she's got the dot, so it's clearly her. So she's in it as well. There's no real
this is Marilyn's second or third role. I think
it's one of her earliest roles.
The loosely Marx Brothers film Love Happy was her very first. Nope. Actually, there's a couple of other things where super small things, but yeah, she did like Love Happy in '49, and then Asphalt Jungle right before All About Eve.
The interesting thing also, Rich, and I know you probably looked at it. I know you're doing a lot of Mankiewicz. A lot of the production background history on this movie is basically about the production, about Mankiewicz getting the story, and Zanuck kind of corralling everything together and picking the right actors and all the acting casting choices. But no problems on set, no fighting amongst the actors. I think mainly because I think if you're an actor and you get the screenplay, you're sitting there and you're just dumbfounded at the words you get to speak, right? You're sitting there and you're like, oh my God. So production happens.
Now Celeste Holmes said Bette Davis was kind of what you would expect, at least a little bit. She was kind of curt at times. But
at times, always. Jesus.
But it doesn't sound like it ever became a big thing on set.
Well, and it's certainly not the Bette Davis we're going to get, with whatever happened to Baby Jane, or like this is a Bette Davis that's happy to be on this picture, and everybody involved is super happy to be there. We haven't even talked about George Sanders or Celeste Holm and or Gary Merrill or Hugh Marlowe. Yeah. They're all extremely well done.
And the film was all shot in Hollywood. There's a little bit of like exterior stuff that was shot in New York, outside of the theater, and also outside of the 21 Club over on West 52nd Street.
Well, and actually, I think this is also like one of the first times you can actually see. You don't necessarily see it, but there's a sequence with George Sanders and Eve Harrington, Addison and Eve walking from the theater that has the New Haven, Connecticut premiere to a hotel, and it's clearly stock footage behind them. Oh yeah, and they're just walking in place, and it's like it's such a great trick, and because it looks like the people behind them are eventually going to take them, and then they make a quick cut where they take a right, and it's incredible. It's really well done.
But like the movie we talked about last week, The Lost Weekend, which also mostly shot in LA, but they did some location stuff in New York, to kind of really give that verisimilitude to it. Just shooting outside of outside of 21 Club, it's very famous. It was extremely famous at that time. It was like where the elite meet, is what they say in the movie, and that's exactly what it was. The interior of the club that they show was a Hollywood set, but outside, the jockey statues are so very famous. We see this movie again in like Sweet Smell of Success, Wall Street. Douglas Sirk's Written on the Wind, and a couple of other films, and it's an amazing club. Unfortunately, it became the business became victim of COVID, and it closed in December of 2020. It
is a New York landmark, has a Russian tea room type feel to it, right? So for 80s movie hounds.
I went there once to have a drink, and it was like, well, I'm not going to do too much else for the rest of the day because I've just spent a very large amount of money on one drink.
I'm broke, I tell you. But production happens.
Yeah.
And they release the film, Rich. They release the film, and it becomes a massive hit for 20th Century Fox. It has earned in its lifetime in theater release $8.4 million, which is not even good for fourth place on last week's box office chart. But the $8.4 million is 5 times the production budget. It cost $1.4 million. When we talk about the box office statistics for these older movies, right? Again, we have to get into how much did it cost. This is also one of the first 20th Century Fox films that has money that was made internationally, right? And this is the kicker. Ready? It premiered somewhere overseas to the tune of $2,348.
Mm-hmm.
So the cumulative gross of this film in the history of its grosses is $8,402,348, which is just amazing.
$8.4 million from 1950 is $104 million today,
which is perfectly in line with an adult drama that catches on and hits.
Oh yeah,
it's perfectly aligned, and it's right exactly where you would do. It is, it had one run. It didn't really, and the box office isn't as important. It's all based on the multiple off of the budget for these movies. And this movie, when you look at it, it's 5 times its production costs. And that's, again, if you're to put it in Avatar speak, which is perfect for these older movies, 5 times its budget cost would be what? $1.5 billion. So, these movies, while they don't seem like $8.4 million, are like, okay, that's what, Demon Slayer, whatever, the one of the releases that happened recently in the box office, that did it in like 3 days. You know what I mean? Like, but for these movies, 8.4 was, they played in screens all across the country, one screen at a time, one town at a time. And it, just kept playing all year, and you maybe got 1 or 2 chances to see it in your town before it wrapped up. Box office isn't important. What's important is the critical mass that fuels behind this film. Critical response then and now. So, Rich, these numbers are astounding. If you go to Rotten Tomatoes, Rich, what's the percentage? Oh, no, I know. If you go to Rotten Tomatoes, the percentage is 99% out of 111 reviews. And audience score is at 94% out of 25,000 reviews. It's an astounding accomplishment that basically everybody who sees this movie falls in love with it in some way or another, or understands its inherent beauty, right? And I think the most interesting thing is that I think this movie fits in with the world we're in right now, right? The fake news, the rumor controversy, the Addison character is a complete design. He would be on Fox News, Rich. He would be shaping things to his fancy. And I think the most interesting thing is, I think it's amazing that the most intelligent people in the entire movie are the women. The guys are kind of dumb. They're amazingly, wonderfully, incorrigibly just dumb. And there are 3 or 4 lines where they're talking about it where you're like, you don't have a vagina, you don't understand. And you're watching it going, no, they're so dumb. Like, they're so dumb.
No. These guys are led around by their all the time in this movie. Yeah. It's funny. I pulled up the one negative review on Rotten Tomatoes, and it's not from the Sheboygan Sentinel or something like that. It's Sight and Sound, which is they're the guys who do best of all of cinema polls every 10 years. It's Richard Winnington, who I've not read a lot of his reviews, and I'm just looking at the poll quote here, where he said, "All About Eve is in essence a play fabricated into celluloid with absolutely no feeling for pictorial style or form. And on that
Wow.
note, though, I think he's kind of right.
Well, you could easily see it as a play.
Yeah, even Mankiewicz's son on the director commentary to the DVD for this movie has said, my dad was not a big guy for moving the camera around. He didn't want, camera moves to distract from what the actors were doing. He's just kind of a point and let them do their thing. If you notice, he doesn't have a lot of, he has occasionally, he'll have a cutaway to an insert to a close-up of one of the actors, but mostly scenes play out, in just like one long take
in real time. I actually think, but I think like from what you're saying,
that is kind of stagey. I don't think it's a detriment to the film. I think if you're doing a movie about the theater, it kind of has to be stagey on a certain.
And also it would be a comment and would be negative if the performances were stagey. But the problem with that quote is that it's not taking into account how great the performances are, how he gets and elicits responses from these actresses and actors. I was watching it. It's like an affectation, right? The performances. There's a moment where Celeste Holm, and again, I don't want to spoil or anything if you have never seen it, but the movie's from the 50s, so grow up. Celeste Holm has lied about something. And the audience knows she's lied. And we're sitting there, we're watching her. Margot says something, and basically it's, and not actually knowing that the lie has occurred to her, has happened to her. And she says it, and Celeste Holm tilts her head and just kind of like has an affectation to it. There may be a stagey quality to it, but and that's only comes into play if you're getting shitty performances from your actors. And they're not. Bette Davis is so good. Although I will say, like, even the positive reviews do have a hint. Like, I always like going to Pauline Kael from the New Yorker. And she, at the time when she's writing it, Joseph L. Mankiewicz's bad taste exhibited with verve is more fun than careful, mousy, dehydrated good taste. His nonsense about theater is saved by one performance that is the real thing. Bette Davis is at her most instinctive and assured. Bette Davis in this movie is a force of nature. She gets to play drunk. She gets to be drunk. She gets to be mean. She gets to worry about age. She gets every female role you've ever seen on screen rolled into one. And she also gets to, be completely paranoid at every turn. It's a fantastic performance. Now, it's only super fantastic, Rich, because Anne Baxter is so goddamn scary evil. There is something about Anne Baxter in this movie. I feel when we get, I'm going to bring it up, but when we get to legacy and franchise viability, she is the great grandma of every sociopath we've ever seen on film. She's the one. She's the one from which they all spring.
Yeah, exactly. If we didn't have this character here, we wouldn't have had single white female.
I swear to God, you stole my brain. That's the movie I was going to mention. So you jumped on me. You got me this week. No, that's fine. We both play a game. We both play a game where we try to mention whatever movie's coming to our heads. You got me this week. But that's one I was going to bring up. I was also thinking about anything whether like the more campier version of Single White Female and the more campier version of All About Eve is Showgirls, which is not a good movie, but it is so campy and so amazing and so in the same kind of groove as this movie. You could legit at a film festival do All About Eve and Showgirls and blow some doors off, because there's a like, certainly the acting in Showgirls isn't as good, although Gina Gershon is very good. But the acting in this is so incredible that we had 4 Oscar nominations in 2 categories. So Thelma Ritter gets nominated, Celeste Holm gets nominated, Anne Baxter gets nominated, Bette Davis gets nominated. It's nominated for 14 Academy Awards, Rich. 14. It ends up winning 6. best sound, best film, best costume design, because, and I didn't know this until I read up on it today, Charles Lemaire is the costume designer, but, and this is an amazing get for Bette Davis, Edith Head designs every single outfit that Bette Davis wears in the movie. Mm-hmm. And so essentially what that means, and for people who don't know and don't know a lot about movies and are watching our show to learn and get things, Edith Head is one of the single greatest costume designers in the history of film. Bette Davis had her alone. Charles Lemaire handled everybody else, and Bette Davis. And so Bette Davis's costumes, when you're talking about somebody saying it's stagey and it's not celluloid-ish, the costume design, the production design, everything, the design aspects are big budget film. You know what I mean? Like, but the editing is really crisp, but it does have a long running time. It goes 2:18, so there's a lot going on. And as I was watching today, I'm like, I didn't like, as opposed to It Happened One Night, which was like an hour and a half, an hour and 40 minutes, chop, Lost Weekend, you know, in the hour and 50-minute range, chop. This runs 2:18, but it hits all the spots it needs to hit.
I think it still moves along great. It doesn't lag at all.
Well, because there's something going on with the cast. The cast is immersed. The cast is, you know, George Sanders is having a blast. Bette Davis is chewing on scenery, and Baxter's playing the crazy woman, like legit. I mean, there's a sequence where you could take it from any thriller you've ever seen. And the sequence I'm talking about, there's a sequence where a phone call is made to the house of the Lloyd character, the writer character, in the middle of the night. And it's this lady on a telephone in the middle of the hallway. And she's like, oh my God, Miss Harrington's, she's sick. And, you know, Lloyd gets up and his wife's worried, but he leaves and she hangs up the phone. And Ann Baxter's sitting on the stairs waiting for her friend, her conniving friend. And they both walk up the stairs hand in hand. And it's just like, that's out of every stalker movie. That's out of every single stalker movie. But it's great.
Yes. Now, the script does a couple of things that normally would work against this movie. And there's certainly things that they tell you not to do in screenwriting class. The first is the movie is basically one long extended flashback. And, you know, just bookended at the front and the back by the award ceremony that they're at. And at times it's like, and then like once or twice it kind of moves back forward and then goes back again. And it feels a little, it can feel a little gimmicky. Here I think it works fairly well. And the other thing though, which also happens in like at the beginning and the end and in the middle, they use multiple voiceover. Not like one character giving us the whole story.
No, it's yeah, I was just gonna say, like, who's the flashback? It's an interesting side. It's an interesting side note because George Sanders' character Addison starts the movie off with, "Hey, you're gonna learn everything. Hey, everything's going." So you think it might be his flashback.
You think he's telling you the story,
right? Let's see. Ken writes, Bette Davis got pretty scary in her later career. Yes, she did, but that was because of the role she was being offered. She later in her career, she's offered Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, and then she's then offered one of the greatest films ever made, which is Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. And that's basically two actresses who decide to go the horror route because they are not being offered anything, and it ends up being, first off, it ends up being war on sets, which was not the case here, although it clearly could have been. It ends up being war on set and ends up being cinematic gold. If you haven't seen Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, I can't help you. Yeah, it's one of the coolest movies ever made. And everything that's written about it, this movie and a great double bill of this movie and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, you could easily say Baby Jane could be Margot in an alternate universe. Because one of the things, what do they say about Margot's character? Margot She premiered on stage in A Midsummer Night's Dream as one of the fairies by walking out naked at 4 years old and never left the stage again. Right? So it could be it's a great pairing movie. Tim also writes, Anne Baxter played a murderess in Columbo episode Requiem for a Falling Star, and Edith Head appears in a scene. I just watched it this morning. Yeah, Tim, everybody's watching Columbo because it's right next to Poker Face on Peacock. But yes,
I'll have to track this episode down. I might even watch that tonight before I go to bed.
I'm all in on Anne Baxter. I got to tell you, you hear things about Anne Baxter, as a movie fan, but then you see this movie and you're just like, there are 2 sequences where she's trying to seduce guys that have been so copied in almost every thriller ever, including the aforementioned Single White Female, including Showgirls. But yeah, it's an incredible performance. So, the responses are amazing. 99%. You know how hard it is to get a 99? And when you look through the reviews, it's basically one of the things that has to be talked about for the film, Rich, before we move on. This script is so sharp. It is like holding a bag of razor blades. It is, when these actors are throwing these lines, I mean, you're watching it and you're looking at it and it's cynical to a T, but if you're not laughing, if you're not chuckling at the lines are hilarious. Mm-hmm. They're like, there's a moment where Margot's talking to her husband, and her husband's been, or her soon-to-be husband, I should say, and he's been spending too much time with Eve. And then he says, well, I'm going to go get you both drinks. And Margot says, oh, fine, I'll take a martini, dry. And he goes, Eve, what about you? And she goes, Margot chimes in with, how about a milkshake? Because she's too young.
This movie is a knife.
It's so amazing.
Slowly into your ribs that you don't even know it, and it's just like murderous. How good and wicked and sharp this is. Yeah, and the reveals. The reveals are. You had mentioned another movie that I was also thinking about watching this movie. There's a movie called Sweet Smell of Success. There's also a movie called The Bad and the Beautiful. If you're dealing with Hollywood darkness or new, yes, Bad and the Beautiful, Sweet Smell of Success, All About Eve would make a great film festival, right? If you decide that you want to go in and watch old school Hollywood glamour, old school Hollywood with great actors and good scripts and dark material, Sweet Smell of Success has Burt Lancaster's darkest turn. And I got to tell you, it's really hard for him to be dark because it's Burt Lancaster. Bad and the Beautiful is one of Kirk Douglas's darker movies. And this movie, while dark, is incredibly funny. Like I laughed. The other two you will not laugh at. You'll not laugh at Bad and Beautiful and Sweet Smell of Success. Sweet Smell of Success might actually have you crying by the end. Because we get a lot of that Hollywood show business glamour, but it is they all are very eager to show you the gross dark underbelly.
It is the LA Confidential underbelly. It is the hush hush dark underbelly that Danny DeVito would be taking pictures of. Anyway, that's a great movie reference. But that brings us to the legacy. What is the legacy of this movie? I was thinking about it the whole time. Rich, you change a few lines, you kill one of the husbands or one of the soon-to-be ex-husbands, you push Margot down the stairs, and you have the makings of a stalker serial killer movie. So we're talking anything from Single White Female to Showgirls to any movies where people are any movies where people are trying to replace other people or taking things too far with the relationship. And it's an incredible legacy, but also one of the things that has to come up about the legacy of this movie is it's first off, it's in the AFI 100. And secondly, it won 6 of 14 nominations. At the time, it was the most nominated Oscar film in history. Mm-hmm. And it won 6 of 14. and it had 4 nominations in the acting categories, and it didn't win a single one, which is kind of like, it's weird. George Sanders wins for Best Supporting Actor, but Celeste Holm and Thelma Ritter both lose. Anne Baxter and Bette Davis are nominated for Best Actress. They both lose. They lose. I looked up, like, because Oscars are all about, what did they lose to? Best Actress that year, instead of Anne Baxter and Bette Davis, is Judy Holliday in Born Yesterday, which is a fantastic performance. Judy Holliday also beat Gloria Swanson in Sunset Boulevard. And this movie beat Sunset Boulevard for Best Picture. So you're talking about, like if you ask most movie fans if they thought Sunset Boulevard had won Best Picture, I would guarantee most people thought it did. Best Supporting Actress was Josephine Hull for Harvey. And basically, but it was all Sunset Boulevard and All About Eve that year.
Yeah, so I think that everybody was probably so split. I think, in the actress and supporting actress categories, everybody was just so, both, the nominees from this film in each category were so uniformly amazing that I think they just kind of split their vote. No one was really inching out, anybody else. I mean, Baxter is holding her own against Davis. It's not even a case where you say, well, they're both really good, but I kind of want to edge towards this. At that point, it's just a matter of taste. And I think that might have been what sunk them, having the double nominees in those two categories.
Well, yeah, no, I think it did. It definitely hurt. It also breaks the kind of weird, when you're talking about 6 nominee performance movies, it wins costume design, it wins sound, doesn't win editing, right? It loses editing, which is an interesting thing for a Best Picture to lose, because usually if you win Best Editing, you win Best Picture. Happened last night, so believe me when I say it. It also didn't win art direction, right? So it didn't win set direction or art direction. And I can understand it now. It didn't even get nominated for cinematography because of what they're saying about the staticness of how it looks. But it's it won costume design with Edith Head and Charles Lemaire, and it lost editing to King Solomon's Mines, which is just, that to me is just wacky. But it is one of the AFI's top 100. It is number 16. So it's in the top 20. And I think the legacy that you look at when you talk about the backfighting, the ingenue backfighting, like you're seeing it a lot. You see it in a lot of different things today where you have a young ingenue coming in, especially with the idea that an actress, this movie is one of the first times on screen that you get to see an actress struggling with being too old for her roles. And Margot makes a decision near the end of the movie where she's like, I don't want to be a 20-year-old anymore because I just turned 40. And so, it's the first time an actress is talking about it on screen. But then one of the legacies of this movie is that that's what Hollywood ends up doing. Hollywood ends up taking the trope from this movie that they want younger and younger versus older actresses. And, we're just getting out of that cycle now, right? We have older actresses that are appearing in fresher movies telling their stories. Michelle Yeoh winning last night. She's not a young actress. So, I mean, it's kind
Jamie
of
Lee
weird
Curtis as well.
Yeah, it's this amazing thing where it's this movie had the legacy of, hey, this is what happens on Broadway and in Hollywood. And that's another funny legacy thing, right? The idea of Broadway versus Hollywood. But in reality, this is Broadway versus Hollywood, but Hollywood was recruiting Broadway stars. So it's, basically Zanuck makes a movie that basically says Broadway sucks. You should come to Hollywood, which I think is pretty amazing. You know, and
there's so many biographical elements here at play from Mankiewicz.
You know, and also like so like in other movies that kind of like it's been a Simpsons episode. It's been Pedro Almodovar took a lot of it from All About My Mother. It's been episodes of Glee, episodes of Gossip Girl, episodes of Will and Grace. It's been
turned into a musical called Applause.
Yes.
That book by Betty Comden and Adolph Green, who were the ones who wrote one of my favorite films, Singing in the Rain. And it starred Lauren Bacall as Margot Channing and won a Tony Award for Best Musical of that year. Anne Baxter then came in and played the role of Margot Channing after Bacall left the role. So that's kind of like a full circle there.
They also right before COVID
wants to become Margot Channing, and then Anne Baxter literally becomes Margot Channing for the musical version.
And they also did a recent stage version in London.
Oh, yes.
Gillian Anderson played Margot Channing, and Lily James played Eve Harrington. And it was part of that National Theater Live program that you see in some theaters. Our friend Natasha saw it, and we were talking about this yesterday, and she said that they did cut the short little scene about playing Rep in Wilkes-Barre. And I don't know if that was because nobody in England would know where Wilkes-Barre is or what would get that reference, or if it was just cut for time. But I said, ooh, no matter what. Another legacy that comes out of it is that later on in her life, Bette Davis actually basically says in an interview with Barbara Walters that she created the character of Margot Channing as a homage to Tallulah Bankhead. Tallulah Bankhead was an actress that Bette Davis, much to Tallulah Bankhead's like anger, Bette Davis kind of came in as a young ingenue and took a lot of Tallulah Bankhead parts that she had done, Dark Victory, Jezebel, Little Foxes, and basically at that point, Davis kind of credited Tallulah Bankhead with being the essence of the Margot Channing character in this Barbara Walters interview, which it's a great interview. And it's basically in the interview, it's her saying that to Barbara Walters that I was Eve, and I didn't even know I was Eve when I was making this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And after the fact, her and Tallulah Bankhead had to sit down, and Tallulah Bankhead pointed out, like, hey, you were my Eve. And I think that's fascinating for film history.
Oh, yeah.
The idea that we've been doing this Hollywood runaround where actresses get thrown out, and they don't, necessarily, they may have more work in them, but it is an incredible film. I can't recommend it highly enough. Actually, all three movies we've watched have been fantastic if you're playing along at home with your bingo card. This is...
They all have held up extraordinarily well, and they all still have things that we find relevant to them today.
Yeah, they're still in play. They're still in play in the sense that, and I guess it kind of goes back to the thing that you and I usually sometimes talk about. If you're a classic movie and you have something to say, it doesn't matter what decade you were made in. You find a way to say it. And these three movies that we've done that are well past our birthdays, right? Our first birthdays.
Yes.
You look at It Happened One Night, you look at Lost Weekend, you look at this, and they're all like, there's still things to say about romance, about alcoholism on screen, about how women are portrayed on screen, and also the opportunities for older women, older actresses.
Feels like that is slowly starting to change, at least.
Well, and I feel like part of the change, Rich, and this is something part of it. In the 50s, when this movie is made, there aren't a lot of female directors. There are probably no female directors, to be honest. And what you're seeing is last night you're talking about Sarah Polley winning for Women Talking, and that movie is produced by Frances McDormand, who is a 2-time Oscar winner herself. And then you have Michelle Yeoh, you have Jamie Lee Curtis, you have older women that are all in positions. And then as somebody who was a presenter last night, Elizabeth Banks is making movies like Cocaine Bear that, probably shouldn't be on an All About Eve episode. But what I would say to you is part of the reason that these actresses are getting places and things to do is that they've branched out into production.
Yes.
They've branched out into directing and writing, and even like somebody like Sigourney Weaver, who is now in 2 of the largest films in the history of film, and at an age like, have you ever had the moment where somebody goes, wow, Sigourney Weaver's old, and you tell them to shut their mouths? You shut your mouth. You don't talk about her like that.
Because if she's a certain age, I have to do the math and arrive at what I know my real age is, and I don't like that number anyways.
And I just don't want people talking bad about Sigourney.
That's
like
true.
The
only female director I can think of through that golden era of Hollywood, Ida Lupino.
Ida Lupino's a great one.
Yeah, I can't think of another one, and I've been literally,
there are actresses that certainly had control, and then there were people behind the scenes like Edith Head, who had control of their own brand, right? And then there were actresses that are not actresses, but ladies that worked with people that kept the directors in check, right? Like you always hear stories about Hitchcock and how his wife was basically the one that kept things running. You know what I mean? So
she deserved more recognition though. She most likely deserved like producer credits on those films.
Well, and but I think part of getting over this issue of females working and not working and struggling, it's an issue that's still relevant. And that's the interesting thing about these movies we picked. Like we picked off a list from, all the decades we're looking at. These movies are still relevant because they instill in the world that what they're still dealing with stuff that's important on film, female empowerment. How do we portray drug and alcohol abuse? How we portray, romantic comedies, and what kind of investment, women had in the 30s and in romantic comedies that, we don't necessarily look at. And as we talk about that, we jump into the 60s, the radical 60s, Rich.
Yes.
For next week. And, the 60s, there are so many great movies in the 60s. We had to whittle down the list. But I'm proud to announce that next week on Generation Movie, we will tackle one of the greatest interracial pairings in the history of film, and something that is definitely relevant today.
The Incredible Two-Headed Transplant.
No. In the Heat of the Night.
Oh,
Norman Jewison's incredible Best Picture winner, clearly suitable only for adults. Can I tell you one of the great things about doing these episodes is going back and finding the old-timey posters. The old-timey posters have been great. But in the Heat of the Night,
I love the art on this poster.
This poster is beautiful.
I'm talking like the oranges with a little splash of green, a little splash of yellow here and there. This is a stunning poster. This is
a beautiful poster. You'd be happy to go to the mailbox and get this in a box kind of a poster. But we're talking. This is Sidney Poitier. This is Rod Steiger. This is In the Heat of the Night. 2 people. An African American cop from Philadelphia and a boldly racist cop from the Deep South, and Rod Steiger trying to solve a murder with the eponymous, they call me Mr. Tibbs, being the ultimate trailer tagline. But it's a great movie. I can't wait to get to it. And the rest of the movies we have picked for the rest of the decades, I'm super excited about. We've picked really interesting films for the 70s, 80s, 90s, the aughts.
Some stuff I'm excited to get back to because I haven't seen in forever.
Yeah, you know what? But it'll be nice to be able to actually go, hey, I remember when I saw this with somebody that you know what I mean? Not that I haven't seen these movies, but going back to the movies that I know I've definitely seen and I know a lot about, going in and doing these deep dives on movies that I maybe didn't have as much experience with. One, it gives everybody a chance to do it with us. Mm-hmm. So In the Heat of the Night is next week's movie. Please join us next week. Rich, where can people find all your Oscar coverage? As we did an extra half hour tonight with regards to the Oscars. But where can people find your other Oscar coverage and everything else?
Everything else. Okay. Besides this wonderful podcast, I have two other podcasts that I participate in. One is Film Scribes, which is the official podcast of the Philadelphia Film Critics Circle, which I happen to be a member of. And our most recent episode came out a week or two ago, where we discussed Cocaine Bear, Operation Fortune, and Creed 3. The other podcast is the Big Picture podcast, which I've been doing now 5 years with my best friend Natasha Bogutsky. I know it is. That's ancient in podcast terms. And we just dropped our most recent episode earlier today. It was recorded last night, just 10 minutes after the Oscars ended.
So bathing in the glow of golden excellence.
Yeah, so we're very excited. We may have a couple of drinks in us. And all of the other writing that I do is at filmbuffonline.com. There you can also find a link to all the episodes of Big Picture Podcast. Looking forward to, in the next couple of days, the piece about the in memoriam problems that the Academy has.
I'm really curious about that.
Coming from one of our great writers, Bill Gadaveskis. I've got a couple of other things I'm trying to finish off, as well as, the usual kind of news reportage and stuff like that. End of the week, I should have a Shazam 2 review up, because I see that on Wednesday. And
I got to tell you,
I can be found on Twitter at FilmBuffRich.
They ruined the surprise, and I'm upset about that.
That one, I think that one's been out for a couple of months. Didn't somebody?
Yeah, but they shouldn't have shown it. I saw it. I was like, I'm going to see it anyway. Anyway, you can find me. Yeah. I have another podcast I do on Tuesday nights, Loud and Nerdy. We also have a Loud and Nerdy group, and we have a Loud and Nerdy page on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook also as JW the Movie Guy. By all means, join us next week in the Heat of the Night. I can't tell you how great a movie it is. Have to participate. Plus, look at how cool this poster is. Come join us next week. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for everybody. Let's see. Wait, somebody commenting. Another great show tonight. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks for being kind, Tim. We appreciate it.
Tim's a good guy.
Tim is a good guy. And sorry we went a little half over. But what was the Oscars? What were you expecting? We weren't going to talk about it. Come on. Have a great night. Thank you. We'll see everybody next week in the Heat of the Night. Have a great week. Enjoy some Oscar movies. Go see a lot of stuff. Women Talking, Everything Everywhere All at Once. If you haven't seen it, you got to see it. It's required. And, keep praying about things like a Goonies sequel and a short round live action show.